For these 6 people, entitlement wasn't just an attitude, it was a way of life that consumed their every waking moment. But their reign of terror was about to come to a shocking end. These are the stories of Karens who pushed too far and paid the ultimate price. It was September 12, 2015, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Sunset Ridge, an exclusive gated community in Scottsdale, Arizona. The 4,200-square-foot clubhouse buzzed with tension as nearly 80 residents filed into the main conference room, their voices creating an anxious murmur that echoed off the vaulted ceilings. The smell of fresh coffee from the hospitality station mixed with the faint scent of desert sage that drifted through the open windows. Patricia Whitfield adjusted her reading glasses one final time as she surveyed the crowd from behind the mahogany podium, her perfectly styled blonde hair not moving despite the gentle breeze from the air conditioning. At 52, the tyrannical HOA president had spent 6 years transforming the once peaceful community into her personal kingdom of rules and regulations. Her day job as a high-end real estate agent provided the income to support her obsessive lifestyle, but controlling her neighbors had become her true calling. Patricia carried a measuring tape and digital camera everywhere, documenting violations with the precision of a crime scene investigator. Her daily patrol routes covered every inch of the community's 240 acres, and she maintained detailed files on each of the 156 households. Residents had learned to peek through their curtains before stepping outside, knowing that Patricia might be lurking nearby with her citation book. Her aggressive enforcement had pushed several families into costly disputes over fines and legal fees. The Hendersons eventually sold their home after repeated citations over minor property issues escalated into thousands of dollars in penalties. Another family left after a prolonged conflict over landscaping rules, leaving neighbors wary of Patricia's zero-tolerance approach. Patricia took immense pride in her zero-tolerance policy and frequently boasted to other HOA presidents about maintaining the highest property values in Maricopa County. She had called tonight's special meeting to discuss her latest crusade: new restrictions that would ban all outdoor holiday decorations and limit pet ownership to 1 small dog per household. The meeting began with Patricia's characteristic intensity as she clicked through her PowerPoint presentation, each slide detailing new violations she had discovered and the corresponding fines she planned to implement. Her voice grew more shrill as residents began questioning her authority, their frustration evident after years of living under her oppressive rule. Patricia raised her voice as she pointed to photos of Halloween displays, insisting they lowered property values. She then turned to pet owners, blaming large dogs for the constant noise. To drive her point home, she stepped onto a chair at the front of the room. The frame shifted unsteadily beneath her weight as she continued addressing the crowd. Without warning, one of the chair's legs gave way. Patricia fell backward, her head striking the stone fireplace hearth with a sharp crack that silenced the room. The impact fractured her neck instantly, and she collapsed to the floor without movement. Blood began pooling around Patricia's head as shocked residents fumbled for their phones to call 911. She lay motionless, still clutching her violation citation book, her final words having been threats about implementing $100 daily fines for Christmas decorations. The paramedics arrived within 12 minutes, but Patricia Whitfield was pronounced dead at the scene. The HOA dissolved within 6 months, as residents voted overwhelmingly to eliminate the oppressive rules Patricia had implemented. Property values actually increased once the community became known for its welcoming atmosphere rather than strict regulations. The clubhouse fireplace was removed and replaced with a memorial garden promoting community harmony, though few mourned Patricia's passing. It was March 8, 2014, and the mild evening air carried the sounds of clinking glasses and animated conversation through the historic district of Charleston, South Carolina. Giuseppe's Italian restaurant hummed with activity as nearly 60 diners enjoyed their meals in the elegantly appointed dining room, the soft lighting from crystal chandeliers creating an intimate atmosphere. The aroma of garlic and fresh basil filled the air, mixing with the subtle scent of aged wine from the restaurant's extensive collection. Brenda Pemberton adjusted her designer reading glasses as she surveyed the menu with the calculating gaze of someone preparing for battle. At 47, the insurance claims adjuster had built a notorious reputation throughout Charleston's restaurant scene as a serial complainer who turned every dining experience into an opportunity for confrontation and compensation. Her pattern of exaggerated grievances and threats of lawsuits had made her a dreaded customer at establishments across the Southeast. Restaurant managers throughout Charleston knew Brenda by name and would often comp her meals preemptively to avoid the lengthy confrontations that could last for hours and disrupt their other customers. Her insurance background had taught her exactly which complaints would generate the fastest results and how to phrase her grievances to suggest potential liability issues that restaurant owners feared most. Brenda had developed a systematic approach to her restaurant complaints, always arriving with a mental list of potential issues she could exploit. She understood how to escalate minor service problems into major incidents that would result in free meals, cash settlements, or both. Local restaurant staff had learned to recognize her tactics, but many establishments still found it easier to appease her than to deal with the scenes she would create. Tonight's target was Giuseppe's, an upscale establishment she had been planning to visit for months. She arrived with her usual arsenal of potential complaints, having researched the restaurant's online reviews to identify service issues that other customers had mentioned. Her goal was ambitious: a full refund plus additional compensation for what she would claim was unacceptable treatment. Brenda began her usual routine immediately, loudly criticizing the bread temperature and demanding to speak with the manager before her appetizer arrived. When manager Tony Ricci politely offered to replace her meal, Brenda escalated the situation by throwing her wine glass against the wall, the crystal shattering as it struck the exposed brick. She stood on her chair to address the entire dining room, shouting accusations about the restaurant's service and demanding satisfaction for her treatment. In her dramatic performance, she gestured wildly with her arms while berating the staff and threatening legal action against the establishment. During her theatrical display, Brenda knocked over a large decorative wine barrel that had been positioned near her table as part of the restaurant's rustic Italian theme. The empty oak barrel, used purely for decoration but improperly secured to its base, tipped forward from her movement and rolled toward the wall. The barrel struck Brenda's torso and pinned her against the brick surface. The impact fractured several ribs and compressed her chest cavity, preventing her from breathing properly. Witnesses said she gasped once before collapsing to the floor. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but she was unresponsive and later pronounced dead at the scene. Emergency medical personnel arrived quickly, but were unable to revive her. The restaurant faced a wrongful death lawsuit from Brenda's family, though security footage clearly documented her aggressive behavior leading up to the accident. Other local establishments came forward with evidence of her pattern of fraudulent complaints, creating a complex legal situation. The lawsuit was ultimately unsuccessful, but Giuseppe's installed safety barriers around all decorative items and implemented staff training for handling difficult customers. Brenda's death became a cautionary tale in Charleston's restaurant community about the dangers of escalating customer service disputes. It was November 15, 2016, and the crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves across the parking lot of Maple Grove Elementary School in Minnesota. The school auditorium buzzed with tension as nearly 150 parents, teachers, and board members filled the folding chairs, their voices creating an anxious murmur that echoed off the 20-foot ceiling. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the institutional beige walls decorated with student artwork. Susan Hutchinson adjusted her stack of printed research articles as she prepared for what she considered her most important presentation yet. At 49, the pharmaceutical sales representative had become a familiar presence at every school board meeting over the past 3 years. Known for her persistence and increasingly forceful positions, she often cited medical terminology and research articles to support her arguments. Her background in pharmaceutical sales lent her authority when she spoke, though her interpretations of the studies she referenced were often incomplete. Over time, her advocacy campaigns led to several staff departures and curriculum changes, prompting concern among teachers and administrators. What began as parent involvement gradually grew into a cycle of conflict that left the school community divided. Her latest crusade involved demanding the complete removal of all technology from classrooms, claiming that Wi-Fi signals caused irreversible brain damage in developing children. She had spent weeks preparing tonight's presentation, complete with cherry-picked studies and inflammatory rhetoric designed to terrify other parents into supporting her cause. Susan's own children had become increasingly isolated as other families avoided association with her extremist views. Teachers walked on eggshells around her kids, afraid that any perceived slight would trigger another of Susan's explosive confrontations with the administration. As Susan began her impassioned speech about the dangers of wireless technology, her voice grew increasingly shrill and her gestures more erratic. She had been experiencing severe chest pains and shortness of breath for weeks, but attributed her symptoms to the school's wireless network, rather than the chronic stress of her constant outrage. She raised her voice, waving papers frantically, and insisting Wi-Fi signals were harming children. Her face had turned bright red, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool evening temperature, as she continued her presentation about the alleged dangers of wireless technology. Suddenly, Susan clutched her chest with both hands, her eyes widening in terror as crushing pain radiated down her left arm. She stumbled backward from the podium, her breathing turned shallow. Between strained gasps, she repeated that the Wi-Fi was making her sick before collapsing onto the auditorium floor as board members and parents rushed to help. She suffered a massive heart attack linked to chronic hypertension and stress. Despite the quick response of paramedics, Susan Hutchinson was pronounced dead at Maple Grove Hospital at 9:23 p.m., her final words being demands that the Wi-Fi was killing her. The autopsy revealed severe coronary artery disease exacerbated by chronic stress and hypertension. Her group faded, and the board emphasized respectful debate at future meetings. The school board also established a mental health awareness program for parents struggling with education-related anxiety. It was December 23, 2017, and the holiday shopping frenzy filled the air at Pioneer Place Mall in Portland, Oregon. The Nordstrom department store buzzed with last-minute shoppers as nearly 200 customers navigated the crowded aisles, their voices creating a symphony of holiday stress and excitement. The scent of expensive perfume from the cosmetics counter mixed with the aroma of cinnamon from the nearby food court. Linda Blackwood wheeled her shopping cart toward the customer service counter with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. At 44, the mortgage broker had developed a pattern of fraudulent returns over the past several years, purchasing items, using them extensively, then returning them with fabricated complaints and demands for compensation. Linda had become a known problem customer at multiple retailers throughout the Pacific Northwest, with store employees learning to recognize her frequent attempts to return obviously used merchandise. She had been banned from several stores but continued her schemes by shopping at different locations and using various excuses for her returns. Her cart contained clearly used items, a designer handbag with visible wear marks, shoes that had obviously been worn outdoors, and clothing with deodorant stains and missing tags. Linda had prepared an elaborate story about receiving defective merchandise as gifts, complete with fake receipts and manufactured outrage. The customer service manager, Jennifer Walsh, recognized Linda immediately from previous encounters and reports from other stores. The store had been documenting her fraudulent activities for months, building a case with security footage and coordination with other retailers. Tonight would mark the end of Linda's return scam operation. When Jennifer politely refused the return of the clearly damaged designer handbag, Linda's carefully constructed facade crumbled instantly. Her face contorted with rage as she began shouting threats and accusations, her voice carrying across the entire store. Other customers backed away as Linda's tantrum escalated into violence. She shouted accusations across the store and threatened legal action against the company. In her fury, she began grabbing merchandise from nearby displays and hurling it at the customer service counter. Linda seized a heavy crystal vase from a holiday display, raising it above her head with both hands. Linda hurled the vase toward Jennifer's head, but the manager ducked behind the counter just in time. The heavy crystal struck the wall and shattered on impact. A large fragment deflected off the surface and hit Linda on the side of the neck, severing a major artery. She pressed her hand to the wound and collapsed among the merchandise as blood pooled across the floor. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but she was pronounced dead at the scene while shocked shoppers looked on. Security footage revealed the full extent of Linda's return fraud scheme, leading to a posthumous investigation that uncovered tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent returns. Multiple retailers provided evidence of her activities, and her family discovered significant credit card debt that highlighted the scope of her fraudulent operations. It was July 4th, 2013, and the oppressive Florida heat shimmered off the asphalt of West Shore Plaza's parking lot in Tampa. The shopping center buzzed with holiday activity, as nearly 500 cars filled the sprawling lot, their occupants seeking air-conditioned relief from the 95-degree temperature. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with exhaust fumes and the distant aroma of barbecue from a nearby restaurant. Deborah Morrison adjusted her homemade parking enforcement badge as she surveyed the parking lot with the authority of a self-appointed monitor. At 51, the bank manager had developed an obsession with parking violations at the mall, carrying printed notices and a digital camera to document what she considered improper parking. Her behavior had cost her friendships and strained her marriage, but she refused to abandon what she saw as her duty. Deborah kept records of license plates and would call police to report violations, even when no actual laws had been broken. She had confronted numerous shoppers over the past 2 years, turning minor parking disputes into major confrontations that often required security intervention. Mall management had repeatedly asked her to stop, but she insisted she was providing a public service. Her latest targets were a young family loading groceries into their SUV. The Johnsons had parked legally within the designated lines, but Deborah believed they were too close to the cart return area, violating her personal interpretation of parking regulations. Deborah positioned herself directly behind their vehicle while taking photos of their license plate, shouting about parking violations and threatening to call police. The father, Mark Johnson, tried to ignore her while securing his children in their car seats, but Deborah's harassment continued to escalate. When Mark began backing out slowly, Deborah deliberately positioned herself behind the moving vehicle, refusing to move despite his warnings. She pounded on the rear window while continuing her complaints about parking violations, her face red with rage in the sweltering heat. The SUV's rear bumper struck Deborah as she moved closer to prevent their departure. The impact knocked her backward onto the concrete, and her head struck the curb. The sound echoed across the parking lot as witnesses called for help. But Deborah Morrison died from severe brain trauma. Security footage showed Deborah's aggressive behavior and deliberate positioning behind the moving vehicle. The driver was initially charged with vehicular manslaughter, but charges were dropped when witnesses testified about her actions. The mall hired professional parking attendants and installed additional security cameras following the incident. It was August 19, 2018, and the cool mountain air carried the sounds of urban life through the courtyard of Pine Ridge Apartments in Denver, Colorado. The 3-story complex housed nearly 200 residents in 80 units, their evening routines creating the normal symphony of apartment living. The scent of dinner preparations drifted from open windows, mixing with the fresh smell of recently watered landscaping. Margaret Daniels pressed her ear against the wall, separating her unit from her neighbors, her decibel meter registering the faint sound of a television at normal volume. At 46, the government clerk had developed an obsession with noise complaints, filing numerous formal grievances during her 2 years of residency. Her persistent complaints had resulted in several families moving out of the complex. Margaret documented sounds throughout the day, maintaining logs with timestamps and decibel readings. She would pound on walls and ceilings at various hours, demanding quiet from neighbors who were conducting normal daily activities. Her apartment contained multiple sound monitoring devices and stacks of complaint documentation. The upstairs neighbors, the Chen family, had endured months of Margaret's complaints about normal activities like walking across their floor and watching television at reasonable volumes. Tonight, their 8-year-old daughter was practicing piano at 7 p.m., well within the building's designated quiet hours that didn't begin until 10 p.m. Margaret became increasingly agitated as the piano music drifted through the ceiling. She grabbed her decibel meter and complaint forms, going upstairs to confront the family about what she considered excessive noise. Her pounding on their door echoed through the hallway, but the Chens had learned to ignore her complaints. Frustrated by their refusal to answer, Margaret retrieved a maintenance ladder from the storage closet and positioned it against the building's exterior wall. She planned to climb onto the Chen's second-floor balcony to continue her confrontation, bypassing their locked door. The wooden balcony railing, installed when the complex was built in 1987, had been weakened by 31 years of Colorado weather extremes. Freeze-thaw cycles had loosened the bolts, and recent heavy rains had rotted the support posts, though the damage wasn't visible from ground level. Margaret climbed the ladder with her complaint notebook tucked under her arm and her decibel meter hanging from her belt. At 5 feet 6 inches and 160 pounds, she represented a significant load for the compromised railing system. Other residents watched from their windows as she reached the balcony level, some recording the scene on their phones. Margaret pounded on the sliding glass door while the Chen family remained inside. She leaned her full weight against the railing to get closer to the window, applying pressure to the weakest section of the deteriorated structure. The railing gave way with a sharp crack that echoed through the courtyard. Margaret fell 3 stories onto the concrete courtyard below, her body striking the pavement with an impact that could be heard throughout the complex. The fall created a loud disturbance that startled neighbors who had been sleeping peacefully despite her constant complaints about normal living sounds. She died instantly from multiple fractures and massive internal injuries, her decibel meter shattered beside her body. The apartment complex faced liability issues for the unsafe balcony railing that hadn't been properly maintained or inspected. A structural engineer's report revealed that multiple balconies throughout the property had similar deterioration, leading to a renovation project. Neighbors provided evidence of Margaret's harassment campaign, documenting her behavior toward families conducting normal daily activities. The Chen family moved out within a month following the incident. New building management implemented policies requiring mediation before eviction proceedings for noise complaints. They installed soundproofing in units with shared walls and established quiet hours that balanced residents' rights to both peace and normal living activities. The complex installed safety barriers around all balconies and implemented regular structural inspections. Margaret's apartment was converted into a community room where residents could resolve disputes through mediation. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now. Chasing views, likes, and validation. Some influencers push boundaries far past common sense, ignoring danger, warnings, and even basic logic. In this video, we're looking at 6 shocking influencer accidents, each one the result of seeking attention. It was September 18, 2016 in Chiang Mai, Thailand. The late morning heat clung to the fenced clearings of a small safari park north of the city. Tourists lingered near shaded walkways as handlers fed elephants along a muddy stretch of paddock. Luis Martin, 29, was a Spanish travel micro-influencer who had built a niche around risk. His social media feed favored raw, spontaneous encounters, swimming close to reef sharks, climbing unstable cliffs, and feeding macaques by hand. Though his following was modest, his content had recently attracted partnerships from small adventure gear brands seeking exposure in Southeast Asia. He prided himself on authenticity, boasting of no filters, no fear, and minimal editing. His trips were self-funded through sponsorships and donations from followers eager to see him push boundaries others avoided. Wildlife tourism in northern Thailand revolved around elephant sanctuaries, many of them semi-legitimate operations catering to foreign travelers. At the privately run Mae Rim Elephant Camp, close access to adult elephants was heavily restricted, particularly mothers with calves. Handlers relied on vocal cues, bamboo poles, and the controlled use of smoke and percussion to maintain order. Methods safe enough under supervision, but dangerous if disrupted. Luis, however, saw risk as marketable honesty. That morning, handlers were preparing a feeding session when Luis began filming near a wooden barrier separating visitors from a cow and her young calf. He asked a trainer if he could stand inside the pen briefly for a closer shot, offering a tip. The handler refused, warning that the calf was easily startled and the mother protective. Luis lingered near the barrier, filming on his phone. When staff attention shifted toward another group, he ducked under the rail, camera held out, narrating in upbeat tones. Other tourists nearby assumed the trainer he'd spoken with had given him permission and continued watching, unaware of the danger building in front of them. From the security hut, a staff member noticed the breach and called out, but Luis ignored it, stepping closer to the pair with a snack in hand. The mother elephant's posture stiffened, ears widening, trunk curling inward. The handler shouted again, running forward. The elephant trumpeted sharply, pivoted, and advanced in 2 strides. Witnesses later described her striking him with a single sweeping motion of her trunk, knocking him several feet through the air. The elephant stamped and tossed her head, striking a wooden post that collapsed beside the body. Handlers used smoke canisters and drumming to draw her away while 2 staff members dragged Luis toward the gate while others called for help. Emergency responders from Mae Rim Sub-District arrived approximately 15 minutes later and transported him to Nakhon Ping Hospital. where he was formally pronounced dead on arrival. Thai investigators ruled the cause of death blunt force trauma resulting from unauthorized entry into a restricted area. The camp was cleared of negligence but faced severe reputational damage. Following the incident, bookings at the facility dropped by half, and animal welfare organizations cited the event in campaigns, warning that such animals should not be kept in captivity. Luis Martin's social media pages were deactivated within 2 days, following requests from his family and Thai authorities. It was June 3, 2017, in Brooklyn, New York. A ring light hummed in a narrow kitchen window of a converted loft, illuminating the labels of homemade superfood tonics lined neatly for show. Ava Green was about to begin a live stream she believed would change her small wellness brand forever. Ava, 24, had spent 2 years cultivating her identity online as a gut health visionary. With a background in communications rather than nutrition, she marketed herself as an approachable guide to natural living, emphasizing authenticity over credentials. Her upbeat videos and bright aesthetic drew a small but loyal audience. She sold ad spots to low-tier wellness companies and relied heavily on affiliate commissions to supplement her part-time cafe job. Her latest focus was kombucha, a fermented tea rich in probiotics but potentially hazardous if brewed incorrectly. Though she often claimed to love experimenting, she had little understanding of food safety or microbiology. Unbeknownst to her, commercial brewers carefully controlled pH levels and fermentation time to prevent contamination, but home methods varied widely. Ava had purchased a starter culture from a local online supplier and modified her recipe to boost potency by extending fermentation. She filmed herself stirring the sugary tea and placing it in airtight jugs rather than the cloth-covered jars typically used for home brewing, a choice that created a sealed anaerobic environment. Untrained but confident, she skipped standard acidity checks to keep pace with her posting schedule. That Saturday, she planned to taste test her first completed batch live. She announced it as her supercharged kombucha reveal and promised followers instant results. Friends later said she'd ignored a sour, almost rancid odor coming from the bottles, dismissing it as part of the natural process. One friend reportedly warned her to open a window because it smells off, but Ava laughed and said it was fermenting stronger. The jugs had been sealed tightly for nearly 2 weeks in her warm apartment, where indoor temperatures that week averaged around 82 degrees Fahrenheit. Around 20 viewers logged on in real time as she arranged them beside her phone stand, cheerful and unaware that she had cultivated more than bacteria. The footage begins with routine chatter. Ava uncorks the first bottle, gas hisses loudly, and foam spills over. She laughs it off, wipes the counter, and pours a glass. She comments jokingly about how strong it smells but insists it's normal, reassuring viewers that she's used to potent batches. She drinks a few sips on camera, describing a tangy flavor and moving on with her talking points. Nothing unusual appears in the footage beyond a brief cough and a comment about it being extra fizzy. After a few minutes, she ends the stream, thanking viewers and teasing a follow-up post. The next morning, Ava texted a friend that she'd been feeling dizzy and nauseous overnight, blaming it on exhaustion. By evening, she complained of blurred vision, slurred speech, and difficulty swallowing. When her friend visited and found her struggling to breathe, she called emergency services. Paramedics transported Ava to Woodhull Medical Center, where she was placed on a ventilator. Despite intensive treatment, her condition deteriorated over the next 2 days as paralysis spread downward through her body. She was pronounced dead on June 6th, nearly 60 hours after drinking the contaminated tea. Forensic analysis of the kombucha revealed high concentrations of botulinum toxin produced during anaerobic fermentation. Toxin levels were consistent with Clostridium botulinum growth in a sealed, low-acid environment, something not typical in properly brewed kombucha. The contaminated starter culture traced back to a small, unregulated supplier, later shut down by health authorities. Investigators concluded that improper storage and extended fermentation under sealed pressure created lethal conditions. Within days, Ava Green's social media accounts were deleted at her family's request. Her death prompted local health departments to issue new safety warnings about home fermentation. Several wellness forums quietly removed DIY fermentation threads, citing safety liability. It was September 3, 2018, on the Algarve coast of southern Portugal. The sea was deceptively calm that evening. Down near the rocks below Ponta da Piedade, Paulo Mendes was setting up his camera for what he called a close encounter with the tide. Paulo, 27, had built a modest following on Instagram by documenting hidden wonders along the Portuguese shoreline. A former hotel concierge from Lagos, he had shifted to content creation after winning a small photography contest sponsored by a local eco-brand. His style was simple: barefoot exploration, natural lighting, handheld footage of shells, crabs, and anemones that he called small universes. He was known for taking unnecessary risks to get cinematic angles, lying on cliffs, climbing slick rocks, wading into shallows during swells. Late that summer, Paulo wanted something dramatic before the tourist season ended. He chose the rock platform beneath a limestone arch near Praia do Camilo, a notoriously slippery zone where the tide could rise several feet in minutes. The Portuguese Maritime Authority had issued strong wave advisories that morning, warning of sneaker swells driven by offshore systems. Locals knew to stay high during evening tides. But Paulo never heard this, nor did he research about it. He invited a friend, Luis, to help film from the safer upper ledge above. The plan was to capture close-up footage of a tide pool glowing with sea urchins as the sunset reflected in the still water. By 7:40 p.m., the tide had begun to push in, but Paulo was still crouched on the lower shelf, his camera mounted inches above the pool. Luis' phone recorded from above as Paulo narrated about coastal biodiversity, his voice muffled by wind and distant surf. The video later recovered by investigators shows subtle changes first: foam beginning to creep higher up the rock, the sound of a deeper swell approaching from the outer reef. Paulo shifts his footing but keeps filming. Seconds later, a sudden larger wave, what coastal researchers call a sneaker surge, breaks over the lip of the platform. The force struck from the side, knocking him off balance. The lens jerks upward as seawater floods the frame. Luis shouted for him to move back, but Paulo was already pinned between jagged rock faces, struggling to regain footing. The current dragged his gear bag and tripod away as he tried to crawl toward higher ground. The next wave, larger still, slammed him sideways, his head striking the rock edge hard enough to fracture his temple. Luis's video captures the flash of white foam, Paulo's arm flailing briefly before disappearing from view. Several tourists on the nearby boardwalk and cliff lookout also witnessed the incident and called 112, Portugal's national emergency number. Local lifeboat crews from Lagos and Portimão stations launched within minutes, but the swells made approach difficult. Rescue swimmers from the Maritime Police reached the site about 40 minutes later and located floating gear near the channel. They recovered Paulo's body nearly 2 hours later, caught in a narrow passage between rock spurs. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as blunt head trauma and hypothermia, consistent with prolonged immersion in cold water and repeated wave impact. Authorities reviewed both phones to reconstruct the event. Analysis confirmed that the wave series aligned with the predicted high tide surge warnings issued that afternoon. Paulo's final footage circulated briefly before being removed at his family's request. The Algarve Maritime Office added new multilingual signs near the cliffs that same month, reminding visitors that calm water is often the most deceptive stage of the sea. It was June 14, 2017, in downtown Los Angeles. On a 5-story service building near Spring Street, Tess Riley was setting up for what she called a raw recovery vlog, a short, unscripted clip she believed would restore her engagement after several weeks of stagnation. The shot was meant to look daring, urban, and improvised. Tess, 30, had built a small online audience by blending lifestyle vlogging with behind-the-scenes looks at urban architecture. She was not a professional filmmaker, but had been pushing her production value after a small camera accessories company offered her an affiliate deal, if she could produce cleaner drone footage. Her videos often featured herself climbing rooftops or filming city sunsets without proper permission. She justified these risks as part of her authentic aesthetic, even though friends said she had little technical grasp of flight laws or rooftop safety. Urban drone operation required tight precision, especially around high-walled streets where GPS signals cut out and crosswinds formed near vents. Tess's friend had lost a mid-range quadcopter the week prior when it clipped a street lamp and crashed onto the metal awning of a cafe. Instead of letting building maintenance or the cafe's management retrieve it, Tess saw an opportunity. A retrieval video, no edits, just her recovering the drone for real. That morning she packed a small camera, a harness she rarely used, and a handheld stabilizer. Her plan was to access the cafe's adjacent rooftop through a neighboring office building and film the descent herself. A technically complex and unauthorized maneuver that she underestimated. At approximately 5:10 p.m., she reached the low roof where the drone could be seen resting about 12 feet below, on the corrugated metal awning. Though the building had 5 floors, the service platform she accessed sat several levels down, overhanging the alley. Wind gusted between the buildings. A maintenance worker from the office next door briefly warned her that the walkway was unstable and not intended for load-bearing, but she was eager to get the footage. Witnesses later said she was focused entirely on framing the shot, positioning her phone on a ledge, adjusting her posture to face the camera, narrating as she reached out for the fallen drone. CCTV footage from the opposite building and 2 bystanders' phones captured the sequence. Tess leaned across a corroded handrail, one foot braced against the ledge, the other searching for balance. As she extended her arm, the rail shifted outward. For a moment, she appeared to catch herself, gripping a nearby satellite dish mount. The mount flexed, then detached, and she fell forward into the alley. Witnesses described the sound of metal snapping, followed by a brief cry. The fall was estimated at just over 30 feet. Tess struck a utility pipe on the way down, then hit the concrete loading area near the cafe's rear entrance. A passerby ran toward her, calling for help as another dialed 911. Los Angeles Fire Department paramedics were dispatched within 3 minutes, arriving alongside police. Video shows 2 people attempting chest compressions, while others waved down first responders from the street above. When emergency crews arrived, she had no pulse. They continued resuscitation efforts for several minutes before pronouncing her dead at the scene at 5:28 p.m. Police later reviewed footage from multiple angles to confirm the fall's mechanics. Building and safety inspectors examined the structure the following morning, noting the corroded railing and missing bolts, but concluded that Tess's unauthorized access and positioning beyond the guardrail were the direct causes of the fatal fall. Family members declined interviews. Screenshots from private group chats later circulated on social media, showing relatives joking about her final vlog and sharing memes referencing the incident. It was September 4th, 2015, in Johannesburg, South Africa. In the dim light of a service lane behind a small shopping strip, 26-year-old Liam Masiko was setting up a video that would end before it properly began. Liam was part of a small wave of South African prank creators trying to break through on social media. His channel specialized in light humor, mock interviews, street dares, and improvised public stunts. It had a few thousand subscribers, mostly local youth. He'd been frustrated that his content plateaued while others who took bigger risks gained traction. That pressure grew after a Johannesburg beverage brand offered him minor sponsorship if he reached 8,000 followers by year's end. He had no safety team or technical knowledge, but he was known for being willing to do what others wouldn't. His friends described him as impulsive, confident, and always chasing a reaction rather than a story. Utility corridors on the city's outskirts were common shortcuts, gravel strips lined with transmission poles carrying 11 kilovolt distribution lines. Residents treated them casually, walking or parking beneath them despite warning signs. Liam saw potential in the setting's eerie glow, where arcs from loose insulators occasionally flickered at night. He planned a live stunt called the Live Wire Dance, teasing followers that he'd perform under the power lines to show fear who's boss. He bought a handful of metallic party balloons and a collapsible aluminum pole to add visual flair. That evening, 3 of his friends joined him with 2 phones and a small LED light for the stream. The weather was still, the dusk humid. They started setting up around 6:30 p.m., waiting for the light to fade just enough for the overhead lines to show faint corona glow. At 6:42 p.m., he started filming. The footage shows him laughing, music playing through a portable speaker, as he moves beneath the nearest pole. His friends can be heard urging caution, but he waves them off and begins dancing, raising the balloon pole for rhythm. In the video, his jacket flutters in the wind, and a faint crackle is audible from overhead. Seconds later, his friends saw the critical moment. As Liam swung the pole upward, its tip neared a sagging conductor less than a meter overhead. A visible blue arc, likely around 4 inches long, snapped from the wire to the metal pole, instantly grounding through his arm and chest. The frame flared white as the feed cut to static. The second camera, still running, showed his body convulsing briefly before collapsing. His friends screamed and backed away, fearing more current. A nearby shop employee, hearing the pop and cries, went to the scene and called emergency services. Municipal workers isolated the circuit within minutes, allowing medics to approach. They found burn marks radiating from his right palm across his forearm, consistent with a contact arc. Liam showed no vital signs. Resuscitation was unsuccessful. Investigators later matched the event to a recorded voltage fault at 6:43 p.m. Utility technicians confirmed that a damaged insulator had been leaking charge, but that no contact would have occurred without a conductor introduced from below. The coroner's report cited fatal high-voltage electrocution, with extensive entry burns to the right hand and shoulder. Officials deemed the death accidental but entirely preventable. Liam's friends shut down their joint account and released the footage only to police. Local prank creators cited the incident in their videos, criticizing Liam's stupidity, garnering more views than his own videos ever had. It was November 4th, 2017, in Manchester, England. Inside a second-floor flat in Didsbury, bright ring lights glowed against fogged windows. A woman was alone, setting up for what should have been another routine filming day for her online cleaning channel. Naomi Ellis, 29, had built her niche on relatable real-life cleaning hacks, using whatever products ordinary households kept under their sinks. She'd once worked part-time at a supermarket, organizing displays for eco-cleaners before deciding to film her own short tutorials. Her charm was her lack of polish, half-smudged eyeliner, worn jumpers, and a practical, upbeat tone. By late 2017, she had nearly 10,000 followers and occasional product sponsors for non-toxic sprays and microfiber cloths. That modest success pushed her to experiment more aggressively to stand out. She wasn't trained in chemistry, didn't bother to research what she was mixing, and had no idea how dangerous some combinations could be. Friends later described her new videos as careless and flat-out stupid, proof that she'd traded common sense for clicks. Her followers had begun to expect daily uploads, and Naomi felt the pressure. Competitors were experimenting with harsher industrial products, and advertisers hinted that impactful results performed better. That morning, she set up her phone on a tripod aimed at a stained bathtub, the caption pre-written, "Cleaning myths tested." The plan was to mix common cleaners and show which combinations worked best on hard grime. To her, it was routine. Simple ingredients, simple demonstration, mixing bleach with other agents. The windowless bathroom had no ventilation beyond a small extractor fan already clogged with lint. A bottle of household ammonia, labeled only multi-purpose cleaner, sat among several unmarked spray bottles, something investigators later noted as a key hazard. Naomi started by pouring bleach into a shallow bowl. The footage later reviewed by investigators showed her chatting casually about old-fashioned tricks. She added baking soda and vinegar first, laughing as it fizzed. Then, after checking her notes, she poured household ammonia into the same bowl, explaining she wanted to test old internet claims about its combined power. Within seconds, she began to cough, waving a hand in front of her face, assuming the irritation was mild. The camera captured her eyes watering, her breathing quickening. She stepped backward, unsteady, muttering something indistinct before doubling over out of frame. The phone continued recording as faint coughing echoed off the tiled walls. Investigators later estimated she remained in the room for less than 90 seconds after mixing the substances. The reaction produced chloramine gas, which rapidly combined with the bathroom's high humidity to form aerosolized droplets that irritated the airways more severely. A neighbor in the adjoining flat heard a dull thud and rhythmic wheezing before it stopped abruptly. When no one answered the door during their welfare check, they called emergency services. Paramedics arrived 10 minutes later, finding Naomi collapsed near the bathroom doorway, unresponsive. Hazmat responders detected dangerously high gas concentrations, and rescuers had to ventilate the apartment before entering fully. Despite resuscitation efforts, she was pronounced dead on scene from acute respiratory failure. Toxicology reports confirmed severe pulmonary irritation, consistent with chloramine inhalation. The concentration levels suggested she inhaled several deep breaths of gas before collapsing. Medical examiners also noted superficial chemical burns around her nose and mouth, a known effect of chloramine exposure in confined spaces. The footage, later used in the coroner's report, provided a clear timeline showing the rapid progression from mild coughing to incapacitation in under 2 minutes. Naomi's social media accounts were deactivated within days at her family's request after online mockery spread. Her small circle of friends held a quiet service in Manchester, noting how a routine filming setup, one light, one camera, and one impulsive choice, had ended a life shaped by misplaced confidence in the harmlessness of household work. Thanks for watching. Like these stories, click here for more. They weren't just prizes, they were life-changing wins that brought sudden hope. 6 ordinary people, 6 lottery tickets, each starting with joy and dreams. But fortune can be fragile. One wrong choice can turn luck into tragedy. These are the most disturbing deaths of lottery winners. It was December 2nd, 2017, in Fresno, California. A local TV crew set up outside a corner convenience store in the evening. The reporter held a microphone while shoppers moved in and out behind them. Sarah Gomez was 29. She worked as a waitress at a roadside restaurant off Highway 99. She often picked up double shifts to help her younger brother. In late November, she won $150,000 in a state lottery. The station planned a short feature at the store where she had bought the ticket. She signed a release form and waited on the sidewalk while the crew adjusted the light. The segment covered basic questions about her win and plans. Sarah stood holding a large check, saying she would use the money for her brother's college costs. Neighbors later said she had told several people this same plan. As the camera filmed, a man in a hooded sweatshirt walked into the picture in the background. He kept his head down and moved slowly along the storefront. He looked at Sarah instead of the camera. He stopped near a newspaper stand about 15 feet away and stood there. A person watching later said he looked like he did not belong and was just staring at her. The reporter finished the interview in one take. The crew shot a few extra clips and packed their gear. The package aired during the early evening news. Producers later looked at the tape again and used a circle to point out the hooded man in the background. The station posted the segment to its website and social media page. The comments filled up with congratulations and short messages from people who said they had eaten at the restaurant where Sarah worked. Sarah returned to her apartment a few hours after the interview. It was a small complex with 2 floors, an outside staircase, and numbered doors facing a parking lot. Around 9:30 p.m., neighbors heard a loud argument near her front door. A woman screamed. A short struggle followed with a sound like something hitting the doorframe. One neighbor stepped into the walkway and saw a hooded man run down the stairs and cross the lot quickly. 2 911 calls came in seconds apart. Operators sent police and paramedics. Officers arrived to find the front door partly open and footprints on the stairs. Sarah lay on the floor in the entryway with multiple stab wounds. Her purse and keys were missing. Paramedics put pressure bandages on her wounds, gave her oxygen, and moved her to a stretcher. She was taken to the nearest hospital and was declared dead shortly after arrival. Police put tape around the stairwell and took photos of the scene. They collected a broken plastic key tag from the walkway and took a sample from a smear on the handrail. Detectives went through the complex and took statements from neighbors who had seen the man run away. They also asked for the TV station's raw footage, including the full take of the interview and any wide shots taken before and after. Investigators compared the broadcast clip with security video from the convenience store. The hooded man's shoes and jacket appeared in both. A second camera down the block showed the same figure waiting near a bus bench as the crew packed up. Detectives asked for more footage from nearby businesses along the route to Sarah's home. A clip from a pharmacy parking lot recorded a hooded man running past about an hour before the 911 calls. Tips came in after the station re-aired the interview with the circled figure. One caller gave a name and car description. Officers found the vehicle and watched it for days. When the driver returned, detectives saw a matching jacket and got a search warrant. The suspect was arrested weeks later. Police found Sarah's key tag and purse parts in his home. A pocket knife with apparent blood traces was sent to the lab. The police chief warned that routine news stories could draw dangerous attention and asked the media to protect Winner's privacy. Sarah's funeral was held the following week with co-workers, customers, and her brother attending. For viewers who watched the story, one image remained: a woman holding a giant check on a sidewalk and a man in a hood standing close enough to see, close enough to follow. It was January 4th, 2016 in Jacksonville, Florida. The holiday season had just ended, and people were getting back to normal routines. In one quiet neighborhood, a rented house stood out with music playing through open windows as people gathered for a small party. For them, it was just another night. For one woman, it was the night everything changed. Angela Ruiz was 32 years old, working as a cashier and raising 2 children by herself. In December, she had won $50,000 on a scratch-off lottery ticket, more money than she had ever held at one time. With the money, she rented a bigger house and bought new furniture. Neighbors said she seemed proud of the place but noticed the stress of work and family never went away. She kept the same habits, including smoking late at night on the porch. That evening, Angela invited friends over. They sat in the living room talking and laughing with cigarettes, candles burning on tables, and drinks spread around. No one thought much about having open flames and cigarettes in the same room. Around midnight, strange sounds broke the quiet neighborhood. A neighbor heard a popping noise like glass breaking, then saw orange light in a front window. Within minutes, flames spread inside the living room with smoke rising and crackling wood getting louder. Another neighbor heard a woman's voice calling for her children. Inside, Angela's 2 kids were able to escape through a side window. They crawled out as smoke filled the rooms behind them. Neighbors ran toward the house, shouting and pointing as flames got higher. One friend outside saw Angela stop near the doorway before she went back inside. He told investigators later that she went back for a box. He had yelled at her not to go back. The box held documents and cash she had saved since winning the lottery. Within 2 to 3 minutes, the rooms filled with thick smoke. It became almost impossible to see. Anyone inside would have had trouble breathing. From outside, neighbors said they could no longer see past the doorway as the fire spread upward. Fire trucks arrived within minutes. Crews forced open the door despite intense heat and poor visibility. Inside, they found Angela at the bottom of the stairs, overcome by thick smoke before she could reach the door. She was carried outside on a stretcher, while crews continued fighting the fire. Paramedics gave her oxygen and rushed her to the nearest hospital. Despite their efforts, Angela was declared dead shortly after arrival from smoke inhalation and burns. In the days that followed, the community came together. Angela's funeral was held at a small church with family, neighbors, and co-workers attending. People collected donations to support the children, who now faced life without their mother. Fire investigators found the cause was a candle that had been knocked over in the living room, with cigarette butts nearby that may have made it worse. Officials reminded people to never leave candles alone and keep them away from things that could catch fire. For neighbors who had seen the orange light that night, the memory stayed clear. What began as a celebration in a newly rented home turned into chaos with smoke, fire trucks, and police tape. Angela Ruiz's story showed how quickly a small mistake could destroy everything, even after the good luck of a winning ticket. It was July 8th, 2017 in Flint, Michigan. Backyards on the block were busy with weekend sounds, as relatives gathered at one small house carrying food for a simple cookout. Robert Lane, called Bobby, was 56 years old and had retired from the Postal Service after decades on the same mail route. In late 2016, he won $100,000 in the state lottery. He used the money to pay off debts, replace his roof, and take relatives out to dinner more often. Neighbors called him the lucky one because he kept his life steady. As months went by, a few relatives began asking for loans more often, bringing up his lottery win at nearly every visit. That Saturday, Bobby set out folding tables and hung lights on the fence while a cousin handled the grill. By late evening, the air was still and warm. A neighbor heard music and laughter from across the alley. Just after sunset, Bobby raised a glass and made a toast about the lottery paying for one more round, like he had done a few times since winning. Midway through the evening, the mood on the patio changed. Bobby was sitting at the picnic table with his glass in hand when he leaned forward. He put one hand on the wood table. People who saw what happened said he grabbed at his stomach like he was trying to steady himself. His face went pale very quickly. A relative at the table asked if he needed to lie down. Someone reached for a chair. He let out a low sound and dropped to one knee. A neighbor who rushed through the gate later told police that Bobby kept saying his insides were burning. The people closest to him called 911 and tried to keep him sitting up. Someone brought a wet towel from the kitchen. He started breathing hard and then slower. Within a couple of minutes, he was lying on his side on the grass. He was not able to stand. The family moved the picnic table back to give space. A cousin waved at the street to signal the ambulance. Paramedics arrived within minutes and walked straight into the yard with a monitor and medical bags. One checked his breathing, while another asked about any known health problems or allergies. They started giving him oxygen and put in an IV. They recorded his vital signs. His pulse was fast but weak. He was put onto a stretcher and moved to the ambulance while a relative rode in the front. The lights turned the yard red and white as the ambulance drove away. At the hospital, a team met the ambulance and took him to a treatment room. Staff put him on monitors, gave him fluids, and ran tests. He had survived the trip, but his condition worsened at the hospital. Despite several hours of treatment, he died later that night. A detective then arrived to begin standard questions for an unexpected death. Word of what happened moved fast on the block the next morning. A few chairs and the tent still stood in the yard. Paper plates had blown to one corner by the wind. Family came and went through the day. By midweek, an obituary posted the funeral details at a church a few miles away. Bobby's funeral was held the following week in Flint. Dozens of postal workers, neighbors, and relatives filled the seats. There was a line of people waiting to sign the guest book. The service was short. Afterward, the family received food and cards from visitors in the fellowship hall. Investigators confirmed that tests showed Bobby's drink had been mixed with antifreeze, likely in a sweet drink where the taste could be hidden. A cousin who had been asking him for money became the focus. Officers collected evidence and the cousin was arrested on suspicion of poisoning. Police warned that sudden cash can change how people around a winner act, and told residents to be careful about food and drinks during gatherings. On the block where the cookout took place, neighbors went back to weekend chores. The only sign of that Saturday night was a small patch of flattened grass where the picnic table had stood. Bobby Lane's win was still a topic on the street, but it was no longer a happy one. It was June 3rd, 2017 in Macon, Georgia. The neighborhood was quiet on that Saturday evening with families on porches and kids riding bikes. On one corner lot stood a small home with boxes stacked near the windows as relatives and friends prepared to help with upcoming repairs. The house belonged to Sheila Grant, a 43-year-old school secretary who had worked at the same elementary school for nearly 20 years. A year earlier, she won $3 million in the state lottery, choosing yearly payments of about $120,000 after taxes. She planned to use most of it for her 2 grown children and grandchildren. Sheila did not live in a fancy way. She kept her small car and continued working part-time at the school. She stayed in the same house she had lived in for years. With her winnings, she was saving for a repair project that would update her kitchen and replace the old siding on the house. Friends said she stayed modest, but people around her noticed she had become more of a target for requests, especially from relatives who wanted loans. Sheila had been in an on and off relationship with Marcus Hill, a 45-year-old man she had known for years. Neighbors said they heard arguments between the two. Sheila's relatives said she had recently talked about ending things for good. Despite the tension, Marcus still visited her house often. He said he was helping with moving furniture and packing for the repairs. On June 3rd, Marcus's truck was seen parked outside Sheila's home late in the afternoon. A neighbor remembered seeing him carrying boxes inside earlier that day. Nothing seemed unusual. By early evening, Sheila's relatives began arriving to help with packing. Around 7:30 p.m., they knocked on the front door, but it was locked. They could hear shouting inside between Sheila and Marcus. One relative later told police they banged on the door and called her name, but he would not let them in. Moments later, neighbors saw Marcus rush out the front door. His shirt was stained with blood and he ran to his truck. One man across the street said he looked panicked, like he was trying to get out fast. He slammed the driver's side door and drove off quickly down the street. Sheila's relatives forced their way into the home. In the living room, they found her on the floor with multiple stab wounds. One relative immediately called 911, asking for paramedics. Another ran to a neighbor's house for help. Police operators received several frantic calls within minutes, reporting both the stabbing and Marcus's escape. Officers and paramedics arrived quickly. Inside, they confirmed Sheila had no pulse. She was declared dead at the scene. Bloodstains marked the living room floor. The knife used in the attack was found thrown away near an overturned box. Meanwhile, deputies spotted Marcus's truck speeding away from the area. A short chase followed through nearby roads until he lost control and crashed into a ditch. Officers pulled him from the vehicle and placed him under arrest. He was taken into custody without further problems. The next morning, news of Sheila's death spread through Macon. Her funeral was held later that week with co-workers, neighbors, and relatives filling the small church. Her children spoke briefly about how she had worked her whole life and only recently had financial security. Investigators confirmed that Marcus had stabbed Sheila during an argument. Detectives said financial stress and relationship problems likely played a role, with relatives reporting ongoing disputes about her winnings. The house remained empty for months with boarded windows. Sheila Grant's story became another warning that even in one's own home, the fortune of a lottery ticket can end in violence. It was September 17, 2018, in Newark, New Jersey. Evening came over a row of attached homes with brick fronts. In one row house near the corner, neighbors knew the place had been under repair for months. The home belonged to Elaine Matthews, a 61-year-old retired librarian. In February, she won $200,000 in the state lottery. She did not want attention and told only a few relatives. She used the money to update her house and sometimes bought meals for neighbors. But she did not show off or talk about the prize. Word still spread. Her sister often mentioned the win at church and on the block, saying Elaine was lucky now and could fix her house and help family. That talk reached beyond close friends. A barber heard it from a customer. A store clerk heard it twice in one afternoon. Two men near the corner store learned that the librarian on the block had cash at home. On the night of September 17th, Elaine was at home when a neighbor saw two hooded men stop near her gate. The men rushed up the steps. The neighbor heard wood crack as the front door was pushed inward and called 911. Inside, the intruders shouted for money. A witness in the next house later told police she heard a woman say to, "Please just take it." The hall was narrow, and the staircase went up along the wall. During the struggle near the top of the stairs, Elaine was pushed and fell the full flight down. She hit the lower landing. A heavy sound shook the wall next door. The men searched through the front room, pulled open drawers, and took two bags. One had household cash and receipts. Another had small electronics. The neighbor on the porch watched the men run from the house and cross the street. He said they wore dark hooded clothes and gloves. He also noticed one man carrying a bag with a paint spot on the side. This detail later matched a bag missing from Elaine's hallway. He told the 911 operator which direction they ran and gave descriptions by height and clothing. Paramedics and police arrived within minutes. Officers cleared the first floor and called up the staircase to check for other people. The medics found Elaine at the bottom of the stairs, lying face down with no movement. They turned her carefully and checked for a pulse and breathing. They put a neck collar on her. She had a deep head wound and signs of head injury. Medics gave her oxygen, stopped the bleeding, and moved her to a stretcher. She was put into the ambulance and taken to the nearest trauma hospital. At the hospital, a team met the ambulance at the entrance. She was taken to a treatment room for scans and evaluation. Despite efforts, her condition did not get better. Elaine was declared dead later that night. The medical report said blunt force head injuries from a fall downstairs during an assault. Police put tape around the front of the row house and began asking questions. Investigators took photos of the broken door frame, took fingerprints from a light switch, and collected a broken screw from the door lock area. Detectives got camera footage from a store and a bus stop at the corner. A video clip showed two hooded figures running away just after the time of the 911 call. Another clip caught part of a face when one man lowered his hood near a streetlight. News of the break-in moved fast on the block. Her funeral was held at a small church in Newark a few days later. Detectives made progress within weeks. a patrol officer stopped a man carrying a bag that matched the neighbor's description. Fingerprints matched a known criminal. One suspect was arrested while police searched for the second. Detectives confirmed the men had learned of Elaine's winnings through talk at a nearby corner store. Police warned residents to be careful about discussing sudden money. For the people on that street, the memory stayed clear. The sound of a door breaking, two men running into the dark, and a quiet house with tape across the steps. Elaine Matthews kept her win private. The talk that spread was not hers. It was enough for two strangers to choose her home and a fall down a narrow staircase to decide the rest. It was May 12, 2015 in Dayton, Ohio. The streets were empty after dark with only a few cars on the main road. At a corner gas station, the lights were on and pumps were bright against the night. For most people, this was just another evening trip, but for one man, it would be his last time there. Kenneth Harris, called Ken, was 49 years old and worked night shifts at a plastics factory. He was reliable and steady, almost never missing work. In March, Ken won $250,000 from a lottery ticket. He used the money to pay bills, buy a used truck, and help his sister with her house. People noticed he seemed happier but was not careful about his good luck, carrying more cash and showing off his new truck at places like the gas station he visited often. That night, just before 9:40 p.m., Ken drove into the parking lot. The security cameras recorded him getting out of his truck and walking inside the store. The station was busy. A few cars were parked near the gas pumps. One customer stood inside by the food shelves. Ken went to the counter. He talked with the worker while he paid for beer and some tickets. The man by the food shelves looked at him several times. Then that man walked toward the door. Another man followed close behind him. The cameras showed they seemed to wait until Ken was finished. Then they went out the door after him. Outside, the parking lot had lights but also had dark areas near the edges. Ken walked back toward his truck. People who saw what happened later told police they saw two men come close to Ken as he reached for his keys. One man told Ken to give him his wallet. A customer at gas pump 3 heard Ken say he had worked for his money before he tried to push past the men. During the fight, one of the men took out a pocket knife. Ken got stabbed in the chest. The knife went in deep, hitting close to his heart. He fell back against his truck, blood getting on the door, then dropped to the ground. The whole thing happened very quickly. Both men who attacked him ran toward the street. One of them dropped a glove as they ran away into the dark. Inside the gas station, things became confused and busy. The worker who had been watching through the window turned off the gas pumps right away and called 911. Several customers ran to help Ken. One person took off his jacket and pressed it against the wound. Another person gave directions to the emergency operator. They could see Ken was bleeding heavily. Ken could not speak clearly. Police officers came within 4 minutes. One officer put a special bandage on Ken's chest wound, while another moved people away so paramedics could help. They gave Ken oxygen, put needles in his arm, and rushed him to the ambulance. While driving to the hospital, Ken's blood pressure dropped and his breathing became weak. The wound had caused internal bleeding, likely damaging his heart or major blood vessels. By the time they reached the hospital, his heart had stopped. Doctors attempted resuscitation, but the damage was too severe. He was pronounced dead before 10:45 p.m. News of the killing spread fast in Dayton. At Ken's funeral, co-workers and family gathered, with many saying the prize money was never really enjoyed. His sister thanked people for their support. Police reviewed security videos and confirmed the attackers had followed Ken outside. Within weeks, 2 suspects with prior robbery records were arrested. Police warned that sudden wealth often brings the wrong kind of attention and told winners not to show cash in public. Ken Harris's story showed how quickly good luck could change. What started as a normal stop for beer and tickets ended with his death at a neighborhood gas station.